It was an eerie October evening when Mark and Lisa embarked on their weekend road trip to a remote cabin nestled deep within the heart of a dense forest. As they ventured further down the winding country roads, the atmosphere grew heavy with an unsettling silence. The towering trees on either side seemed to lean closer, as if whispering secrets known only to the darkest corners of the woods. The couple exchanged uneasy glances as their car's headlights cast feeble beams through the encroaching darkness. Lisa clutched her jacket tightly around her, trying to shake off the inexplicable sense of foreboding that had settled over her. "Mark, something doesn't feel right about this place," she whispered, her voice quivering. Mark chuckled nervously. "You've got a vivid imagination, babe. We're almost at the cabin." However, their optimism would be short-lived, for fate had something far more sinister in store for them. As the twilight shadows lengthened, the car's engine began to sputter and cough, eventually succumbing to a pitiful gasp before dying completely. The dashboard lights flickered and extinguished, leaving them stranded in the pitch-black night. Panic gripped them as they desperately tried to restart the car, but their efforts were in vain. With each futile attempt, their isolation seemed to deepen, and dread settled over them like a suffocating shroud. "We need to find help," Mark declared, his voice unwavering. "I saw a faint light coming from a farmhouse not too far back. Let's head there." Reluctantly, they left the car behind and began to retrace their steps. The night air was heavy with an unnatural stillness, and the wind carried eerie whispers through the trees. The rustling leaves seemed to mimic faint, ghostly laughter. The farmhouse emerged on the horizon, a decrepit structure with windows that gaped like empty eye sockets. It appeared long abandoned, but desperation left them with no choice. They entered cautiously, their footsteps echoing through the sealant darkness. Inside, the scene that met their ears was a nightmare made real. The walls bore grotesque, bloodied symbols and strange markings adorned the floor. It was clear that something unspeakably sinister had taken place here. Dread clenched at their hearts, but they needed help, and there was no turning back. Their exploration led them to a bedroom on the upper floor. A window overlooked the moonlit cornfield where they had noticed a scarecrow earlier in the evening. But now, it was closer, its twisted grin visible even in the dim light. Mark rushed to the window hoping to signal for help, but as he leaned out, the scarecrow's head turned slowly to face him. It began to move, its straw-stuffed limbs bending and creaking as it descended from its perch, with a grotesque fluidity, like a puppet on invisible strings. A scream tore through the night as Mark stumbled backward. Lisa rushed to help, but the scarecrow's movements were eerily unnatural, its fingers like icy talons as they seized Mark by the throat. He gasped for breath, his face contorted in agony, while Lisa tried in vain to pry the creature's grip from him. As Mark's life was extinguished by the malevolent entity, Lisa could only watch in helpless horror as the scarecrow, now saturated with his blood, returned to its place in the cornfield. It resumed its eerie vigil, its grin now twisted into a ghastly, victorious sneer. Lisa, paralyzed with terror, remained trapped in the abandoned farmhouse, surrounded by darkness and the chilling realization that they had unknowingly stumbled upon something far more sinister than they could have ever imagined. And as a final plea for help, we ask you to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling tales of terror. Just remember, not all horrors are confined to the realm of fiction. Stay safe out there, and may you never encounter the horrors that lurk in the shadows. Lisa's life had descended into a never-ending nightmare since that harrowing night at the abandoned farmhouse. The malevolent memory of the scarecrow and the loss of her beloved Mark tormented her relentlessly. Sleep had become a distant luxury, for her dreams were haunted by the twisted specter of that monstrous entity. With each passing day, a darkness grew within Lisa, fueled by an unquenchable thirst for vengeance. She could not let the scarecrow go unpunished for the unspeakable horrors it had inflicted upon her life. Over the months that followed, Lisa meticulously prepared for her return to that accursed place. She delved into ancient tomes and scrolls, searching for the most potent spells and rituals to combat the supernatural evil that had taken Mark from her. The once familiar forest had transformed into a labyrinth of dread. Its very presence seemed to mock her as she ventured deeper into its heart, determined to confront the malevolent force that had destroyed her happiness. The moon hung low in the sky as Lisa finally arrived at the wretched farmhouse. The wind whispered eerily through the trees, and the air was charged with an otherworldly energy. She could feel the presence of the Scarecrow, its malevolence reaching out to her. Lisa entered the farmhouse once more, this time armed with a bundle of protective herbs, an ancient book of incantations, and an unyielding determination. The grotesque symbols on the walls and floor seemed to writhe with a sinister life of their own, but Lisa pressed on, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. As she made her way to the bedroom where Mark had met his horrifying demise, a flood of memories washed over her. She remembered Mark's infectious laughter, his warm embrace, and the way he used to playfully touzle her hair. Tears welled up in her eyes as she recalled their time together, and the unbearable ache of missing him weighed heavily on her heart. The window overlooked the moonlit cornfield where the Scarecrow still stood, its grin now a grotesque leer as if mocking her return. Lisa's resolve hardened as she thought of the life they had planned together, a life stolen by the malevolent entity that had claimed her beloved Mark. With trembling hands, Lisa began to chant the incantation she had painstakingly memorized. The words were ancient, their meaning lost to time, but their power was undeniable. The symbols on the floor began to glow with an ethereal light, and a protective barrier formed around her. The Scarecrow, sensing the impending threat, began to move. It descended from its perch, its movements once again grotesquely fluid, and it approached Lisa with a malevolent intent. But Lisa was ready this time. She brandished a knife forged from iron, a potent weapon against malevolent spirits. As the Scarecrow lunged at her, she slashed at it with all her strength, severing its cursed entity from its straw-filled shell. A piercing scream echoed through the night as the Scarecrow disintegrated into a dark, swirling vortex. But this time, the entity fought back with a furious vengeance. It clawed at Lisa's very soul, trying to drag her into the abyss with it. Lisa's vision blurred, and her strength waned as she struggled to maintain the incantation. The malevolent force within the Scarecrow was relentless, a relentless hurricane of darkness that threatened to consume her entirely. But Lisa's determination burned brighter. With the last reserves of her strength, she completed the incantation, sealing the malevolent entity within a mystical prison. The Scarecrow let out a final, tortured howl before dissipating into nothingness. Exhausted and battered, Lisa finally collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. She had endured a desperate battle against a malevolent force that had haunted her for far too long. Her vengeance was exacted, but the cost had been steep. As she left the farmhouse behind, the forest seemed to sigh in relief, as if the darkness that had clung to it for so long had been lifted. Lisa had faced her demons and emerged victorious, forever changed by the horrors she had endured and the price she had paid for her vengeance. And as a final plea for closure, we ask you to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more tales of courage and triumph in the face of unspeakable terror. Remember, even in the darkest of nightmares, there can be a glimmer of hope.